Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, a podcast and video series dedicated to helping us overcome the limiting beliefs, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome that so many of us HR professionals face. Here are your hosts with over 45 years experience in HR and certified life coaches, Jen and Katherine.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. Jen, how are you?
Doing so good, Katherine. How are you?
I'm doing so good too. Now that we just spent the last hour doing our strategy session for 2025, I'm doing great. I have to admit, this has not been the easiest week for me personally or professionally. So it's always just so good to catch up with you, and you lift me up every single time. So thank you for the last hour. And I'm so excited for this next hour too.
Same. And I'm so excited for 2025. I think us, having an opportunity to really put our heads together and talk through, where we're at here. We're at episode 37 and, how far we've come. And then also just the juices flowing on what is to come. And boy, oh boy, everybody, buckle your seatbelts because 2025 is going to be really, really exciting when it comes to the Thrive and Shine HR.
Oh, it's going to be so good. We're so excited that we are doing this with you as our listeners, because what's the point if Jen and I are just talking with each other? It's really for you and all about you, because it's just so important to thrive and shine when we can in HR and outside of HR too. We obviously cross that line in this podcast. So what I love about this week, episode 37, is it's all about a post-election workplace. The election, as of this recording right now, is November 7th of 2024. So we are 48 hours past, quite literally, the closing of the polls. And boy, has a lot happened in the last 48 hours. So today we're going to talk about calm, cultivating community in a post-election workplace. So Jen, before we dive in, I'm curious what the best part of your week has been so far.
The last hour? I think, similar to you, it's been a bumpy week. There's a lot of emotions out there. There's a lot of emotions in here. Yeah. And being able to have that time with you where we really were talking light, and we were talking, just really being able to set some goals. And yeah, it really felt exciting to know, hey, you know what, there is a lot of crap out there that's happening that we have no control over. But we have control over right here, right now, between us and what it is that we know that we have been able to offer and want to continue to offer in this community. And so that to me was by far the highlight of my week. So thank you so much for the best conversation I had this week by far.
By far.
How about you? What has been the highlight of your week?
I mean, that conversation, it was so uplifting, especially after, and we'll get into this, especially after what I've experienced this week. My head was down. I was having a hard time getting excited for the future, if I'm being really honest. And that last hour just helped me pick my head up, look forward, and say, okay, how do you want to help the HR profession? And what I learned and what I knew to be true even going into our conversation was that you and I are so aligned in terms of elevating women and helping women and never giving up. And I think one thing we forget to do is put systems in place so that it's manageable and it's doable and it's not overwhelming. So for a little peek behind the curtain, that's really what Jen and I were talking about. It's like, okay, how do we systematically put the scaffolding in to make sure this podcast is reaching the far corners of the HR community, and you as our listeners, you are included in that, right? Mm-hmm. So it was great. I really appreciate the last hour, and I'm really I've just been through so much in the last couple of days in terms of the election. So, I mean, Jen, let's just keep talking about it. The elephant in the room, so to speak. And before we talk about how the election has seemingly impacted your workplace, I would like to hear how it's impacted you personally and you professionally as an HR expert in the last week. Before we get into like everybody else in the workplace, walk me through how this last week has impacted you at home and at work.
It's really interesting because I don't think I was really like mentally bracing in the way that I was until it actually happened and hit, where I finally realized, oh my gosh, I've kind of had like this internal guard that has been building up for several days leading up to it, regardless of which direction.
Interesting.
I mean, I work in an environment where you've got a little bit of everything, you've got a little bit of this and that. So either way, it had that potential of being emotional, not potential. Why am I? It's not even potential. It was almost certain that it was going to be an emotional time for people, because either you're very passionate on one side or you're very passionate on another. But most people in one way or another, they have an opinion on something like this. It's not a light thing. This is actually, as much as we can, kind of laugh and try to be light as we possibly can. This is all big stuff. It impacts every single one of us. And so I think personally, there's been like this bit of bracing that's been building up. And, we were kind of laughing before we came on because we were talking about what you and I were like, 8 years ago in 2016 when everything went down then, and how we coped, how we responded, how we managed is so different than it is now. And so when I look back on that Jen who was drinking before, during, and after, right, and who was self-medicating in whatever ways I could possibly find to be able to get myself through, versus now I'm just sitting with it. I'm allowing myself to be pretty darn uncomfortable with all of this. This is not, an ideal situation for, so many ways. And yet, others are singing and celebrating. And so emotionally, there's a lot going on. And how can I just be with it?
Yep.
And I think from a personal perspective, it's new. This is kind of a new thing for me. And so I'm not going to lie. It's uncomfortable. It's not a lot of fun. I haven't been sleeping super, super well the last few nights. And yet I also know that this is a version of myself that I'm very much meant to be in this moment, even if it doesn't feel great right now. Like, even if it's a little bit like, what's happening, I'm okay with it in a way that I don't think I've ever been in any kind of situation like this before. So personally, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay, but I would much prefer that we start, turning the corner and moving on and moving forward, and hopefully by the end of this episode, we'll all be feeling that, here we are, here it is, now what? So what about you? How are things going with you personally this last week?
Well, interestingly, I mean, for any of our listeners who are new, welcome. For those of us who have been with us for a while, welcome back. I, just like Jen, I no longer drink alcohol anymore. And that's only occurred in the last year. And I hadn't given it much thought, if I'm being honest. What I did notice is that I have come a really long way with my anxiety. I was diagnosed having general anxiety disorder about 5 years ago, and I'm no longer anxious, like have a small baseline of anxiety all the time. And it came back. My anxiety came back earlier this week. And I really noticed it when I checked into this Airbnb where I am right now. And there was a welcome bowl of cookies, of Nutter Butters and Chips Ahoy. And I am really doing a great job with my diet. I did some stress eating. It was the night of the election. I was actually driving across the state of Colorado and then into Utah. And I was like, this is great. I'm not really paying attention to all the early things. I'm not just wasting time sitting in front of the TV trying to see what's happening with the election. And when I walked into this Airbnb, I mean, I realized how nervous I was. I was amped up. And I went to town on those cookies. And that was my first noticing of like how much this was personally impacting me. So yeah, I just remember like texting with my family, saying, I really need to read my book, but I just keep going back and hitting refresh on my phone because I want to know what's happening. I want to know what's happening in my state of Colorado. I wanted to know what was happening across the United States. My mom was like, why are you doing this to yourself? You can't control it. So it was just it was a really interesting couple of hours, not couple of hours. I mean, like half a day of really sitting in this anxious energy I hadn't had in years. No exaggeration, in years.
Yeah.
And then I woke up post-election, and I'm going to be very, very honest. I was in the camp of people who were extremely devastated. And primarily, if not only because I stand so firmly and so tall for women, and my view of what Trump represents is not that of standing tall for women. Now, I've done a lot of thought work in the last couple of days to move myself out of that thought, out of that frame of mind, and to really open myself up to what are you missing about Donald Trump that half of America sees and believes in? And I have really dug into my curiosity. And that is just what I talk about so much in Empower Hour. And it just gave me a sense of peace, a little bit of hope that perhaps it has been my news feeds. Perhaps my viewpoint has been so tainted by what I've experienced personally with gender and pay inequity, with women in the workplace, that I don't even give people a chance. If I think that there is any violation of Title VII, if there's any bone in their body that discriminates based on sexual orientation, against women, against, all of those types of things. So I had to get really honest with myself and say, okay, like, who are you going to be moving forward? How are you going to serve your clients? So it's been a very, very interesting couple of days. That's for sure. That is for sure. And I've stopped eating the sweets, so my blood sugar is regulated and I'm feeling a lot better and I'm not as shaky. So there you go. Woo! How's that for vulnerability?
I love it. I so appreciate it too. I think, it's so important for us, on this broadcast that, regardless of our political affiliation, this is a lot. And especially for those of us in HR, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle that you're on. This is an intense type of time. And so I think, we'll really get into that with this episode. But, having that anxiety, I'm right there with you. 100%. And it doesn't, and I really was able to reconcile that and say, well, wait a second, even if I have a strong feeling one way or another about a candidate or about this issue or whatever, I can also recognize that a lot of that anxiety is because that's what we are coming into in terms of like our day-to-day, whether it's the coaching that you do or working with employees that I do. Everybody, I have not had many exceptions at all over the past several days of those who are not feeling kind of a bit of an emotional tidal wave with that. And so being able to just let that be okay has really been something that I've been really trying to kind of focus in on, because I definitely will let myself sometimes get a little bit wired up and not even, whether it's stress eating or whatever, now that, drinking is not the thing, but whatever it is, I have to be like, okay, what's going on here? and recognize, oh, okay, it's completely understandable that this is, creating anxiety, that this is because we have no idea, what's going to come next. This is
Right.
all, everything is kind of shifting.
Yeah.
And that's not a joke, that is happening. And so regardless of where you stand. And so with that, when you're in the world of HR, helping people, supporting environments and organizations, that's a lot to like think of, okay,
Yes.
wait, now what? Right.
But
And not
speaking
having
of,
that
like,
knowing.
go ahead.
Yeah, not having that knowing, or that uncertainty of being in this place. Of course it's going to create tension and anxiety. So I think that's kind of where I'm really sitting at this point now today, after the last couple of days of being a little bit all over the map, of
Yeah.
just being able to settle into it and say, okay, it's going to be here for a while. I don't think
Yeah.
it's going away tomorrow. I think it's going to take some time.
I love that openness and that willingness to sit in the discomfort.
Yeah.
And instead of shoving it down with cookies like I did on Tuesday, thanks Chips Ahoy, or alcohol, or whatever someone's preferred form of escapism might be. So it sounds like you and I both kind of, because of healthier choices we've made for ourselves in this lifetime, we experienced this election a little bit differently. You already started to go there, but how has the weather been in your workplace this week? I know we've covered what you and I have personally experienced, but what about the workplace? What have you witnessed?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, it's a lot. It's all over the map. I think I've shared before that I'm HR manager for a little community grocery store, cooperative grocery store. And it's so fascinating because, we have the gamut of different perspectives and opinions. And in the small community that this little grocery store is, you've got it all. It's more Democrat than Republican overall, but yet even within that that group, you've got a lot of different people who have very, very strong opinions that don't necessarily sit in one bucket or another. And a lot of it around, healthcare and vaccines and, immigration, all of these very heavy issues. And so not only within our employees have there been, spurts of emotions that have come up, this week, and whether or not, people are recognizing that it might be because of that underlying anxiety or not. There's been more employee relations. There's been more, conflict. We're helping people through conflict type situations and just all kinds of stuff, So then I was talking with one of our grocery managers today, and the same goes for what they're seeing with customers right now. You've got a lot of cranky customers. You've got a lot of people who are really just hot, and bothered about different things. And so, I think just from an emotional perspective, people are a little bit off. And so that, from my standpoint of where I would have in the past not been able to necessarily recognize that for what it is, and be, understanding for what that is, and instead be just like, you can't do that. You need it, and instead being very like assertive, maybe in correcting and addressing different types of behavior right off the bat. Instead, I'm just allowing for a little bit more space with it. And we'll see how it goes. But so far, I think it's been a really good way for me to be able to not feel so tense and so much stress around the things that I can't control, and also recognizing the things that it's just part of the flow of it. So it's definitely been a little bit more exciting this week. I am earning my HR manager pay
Times 12.
And yet I also very much know this too shall pass. Shall pass. How about you? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you experiencing?
Yeah. And for our listeners who might be new, I am more in the consulting world, very much out of the 9-to-5 world. It's only been 2 years since I've been out of the 9-to-5 world. And it's so fascinating. I have one-on-one consulting clients, some of whom are ecstatic, right? Very passionate. And I respect everybody's passion, and they're ecstatic about the result of the election. And over here, I have clients who are devastated. So, and everything in between. So I'm not surprised by that at all. It is very much sort of aligned when I look at the statistics from the election, the 47% to the 53%, just truly half of the United States feels one way, half feels the other way. I don't have a single client who is ambivalent, who did not feel passionately one way or another, which I find very interesting. As we've been talking about, it's just so emotionally charged. And when I led HR Empower Hour on Tuesday, so halfway through the election day, the very first question I asked of HR Empower on this very topic about cultivating community in a post-election workplace, I asked if people were feeling anxious or energized. And because of my now conscious bias, then even on Tuesday, I was leading that with unconscious bias, right? I thought that most women, because of Title VII and all we stand for, I'm being really honest. I was like, I thought everyone on that call would be experiencing anxiety, and they would be looking for some sense of calm, maybe because of what the title is too. The title is Calm, Cultivating Community, right? And the numeric rating that people gave was across the board. I did not expect that. I just didn't. I thought people would be a lot more anxious. People were excited. They were energized as the election was happening. So again, it was very humbling for me. And it really makes me curious to speak to people who are not in my immediate circles. I did this on social media after 2016. I opened up my social media channels. I have friends across the aisle, but even on social, it's just more prevalent, I guess. And I truly cannot wait to have an open dialogue with HR professionals out there who also stand behind Title VII and stand for Trump. I really, really look forward to talking to people who are on the opposite end of the political spectrum, because there is obviously something I am missing. I'm very aware of my bias, and I just really look forward to looking forward and truly understanding what, quote unquote, the other side is seeing and hearing. I'm fascinated by it all. I'm not as caught off guard like I was in 2016. I was way caught off guard in 2016. I did not see it coming. This time I saw it coming. Yeah. I didn't know which way it was going to go. And it's just so fascinating to me. Just how opinionated people are. And I don't know. Anyway, I'm probably going off topic. Jen, should we move on to the meaning of community? Speaking of looking forward, right? Should we go there?
Yeah, let's go there. Well, I want to just really quick just touch on something, because I really love what you said around that humility that you have around. I really want to learn. I really want to understand. And that wasn't me in 2016. That wasn't me, that hasn't been me even 4 years ago. And I can really relate to that too. Yeah. And what a beautiful thing, even with the anxiety, even with, kind of the that's going on, there is this stronger desire than ever before of tell me more. Where do I need to learn and understand? And that is really I'm excited about that. And I
Yeah.
don't know exactly where that's taking me yet, because I have been throughout my life pretty removed in terms of, really being open to kind of having those conversations with others who have very different perspectives and opinions other than myself. But I am now at that chapter in my life where I'm like, come here, come
Yes.
and I'm really,
Yes.
I'm excited to try to understand that more. And so I really, really loved what you said about that, around having that humility of, okay, you know what, I may not know as much as I thought I did, right? Like
Yeah.
for me, I went down a rabbit hole the last couple of days around really believing for so long that where I was getting my news, the media I was ingesting,
Yes.
was really the media that was telling me, quote unquote, the truth. And I think as a collective, right? And you've got different people on different sides who have been sounding those alarms for quite some time,
Absolutely.
but I'm listening more than I think I ever have before. So the fact that you said that a little bit ago, it gave me chills, because I'm like, damn, we're like so on the same page with that. There's
Totally.
something happening here that allows us maybe that little bit of opening that I did not realize I was ready for. And I absolutely believe, and it sounds like you as well, that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
ready for that. And even if it means ultimately my opinion is going to, stay my opinion, but I really want to understand in a way that I think is kind of, I feel as though I've kind of leveled up a little bit more.
Oh,
And so, yeah, who knows where that's going? And I'd be so curious with our audience, are you out there? Are you guys feeling the same thing, regardless of what side of the fence that you're on? Are
yes.
you more open potentially than maybe you have been in the past to really want to learn and understand? Or are you finding, where you maybe have been in the past where you're like, F them, I'm just going to unfriend. And, like you see all
Totally.
of that on different sides. But I think the more that you and I have really put in the work in ourselves and done, our own personal inner work, the more fascinated I find that I am
Yeah.
with being able to learn and understand other perspectives and points of view. So that does give me hope. It gives me more optimism than I thought I was going to have, should the outcome be what it has become.
Totally.
If that makes sense.
Well, I love what you just said maybe about a minute or so ago about like unfriending, right? I mean, the reality of HR, we can't unfriend our coworkers. We can't. Like, we are expected as HR to show up being the UN.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we are Mr. and Mrs. Neutral.
Switzerland.
And I wonder, when we think about community, Jen, when you think about the term community in the workplace, why is that vital for you? Specifically in a post-election workplace?
Yeah. That's such a good question. I think community is about acceptance. I think community, like a true community, is about really being able to lean into our differences in a way that allows us to shine, right? And I think that, so often in different bubbles and different silos, that's really tough to do. And one of the things that I've really been working on in my year plus in the role that I've been is, how do I really break down these silos? How do you really kind of start seeing more fluidity from one area to another, whether it's department and work group or whatever? And that is, for me, is where you see the magic of community come out. And so in this environment, when we talk about, post-election and how do you really cultivate community, it's that. It's really finding our similarities and finding the things that really join us and help us become, more connected with one another. And so,
Totally.
talking with my boss today, we are so focused. My theme for 2025 is going to be about well-being and really finding the ways to help people connect with themselves, which is then going to just naturally help us to want to connect with one another. And so I think when we talk about kind of post-election and where do we go from here, it's that's it for me. How can we become more at peace and connected with ourselves, which is going to then naturally connect us with each other.
Girl,
what about you? What comes up for you?
I love that. I love that focus on well-being for 2025. And
me too. I'm excited.
I freaking love it. My answer is a little bit different, which doesn't always happen. Usually our brains are like two ships passing together in the night, like side by side. My brain goes to breaking down, being very literal with the word, which wouldn't surprise any of my clients or past coworkers or anyone in my family. I can be very, very literal. And when I think about the word community, I think of common and unity. And truly, and I looked up, I don't have it in front of me right at this moment, but I looked up the Latin derivatives of the word, and it's something like communist, but not communist. I don't know. I'm not even going to get it right. I think about what unifies us, is that we are all human and we all have so much more in common than we have uncommon. And when I think about that word community, if we within our organization start to truly see ourselves as a community of people versus an organization comprised of people, that's a huge shift. And I even would go so far as to say replacing the word of organization or employer and employee with community. Oh my gosh. These little shifts could be huge for us.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I've never heard that, that way of describing community, common unity. Like I had not heard that before. And I'm just like, my brain is like,
I know.
Yes.
I know.
Yes, common unity, right? And that is, where we truly can find each other in this space of being able to find those common unities.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
And kind of going back to what you were just sharing, we talked about this in HR and Power Hour on Tuesday, like that judgment and that judging of somebody who has a different political affiliation. What if we asked the 5 whys? What if we, why are you such a strong proponent of Donald Trump? I really truly want to know. And if someone says, well, I'm pro-life, let's just say I'm pro-life, or I really believe in states having power over Roe v. Wade versus federal, whatever that is. Why is that so important to you? Like, I really want to, and I think just approaching it with curiosity will allow us to finally find that common unity, as opposed to, well, I'm pro-life and you're pro-choice, and I'm sorry, I just don't even respect you. I don't agree with you. I don't even care why you think that way, but I'm going to argue my point because I want you to become pro-life. That is not what gets us to community. What gets us to community is that curiosity. Like, oh my God, I'm pro-life, you're pro-choice. Let's have a conversation, because underneath all of that, there will be a common denominator, and it's just opening ourselves up to that conversation in a very heartfelt way, in a very compassionate way, and listening in a way we haven't before. So exciting.
Oh my gosh. So well said. So well said, because I absolutely agree that, being able to kind of get past the grandstanding of my position and your position and really recognizing we're two people, and we, do have these different things that we feel passionately and strongly about, but there are always going to be common denominators that unite us. And being able to kind of come from that place more and more, I'm 100% seeing that in the way that I'm going to be functioning in 2025. And I am so down for it. And maybe in some ways, right? I was having this conversation with my boss and our union president today, which is so funny.
Damn, girl.
Maybe in some ways there is that silver lining, when you see things reach this like intense level and you get to the point where you're like, well, wait a minute, are we really that different? And what is it that really makes that so? And is that partially just our tendency, right, as natural human instinct to go there versus starting to question that, starting to be curious, like you said it so well. And that, I think, is there's magic in that. And if we allow for it, and it's not going to be perfect every time, but that's where I think there's a little bit of an opportunity of trial and error in that place, that I don't know that I've felt that in quite this way before. And maybe it's just me, and maybe, maybe you and I are kind of like off on this island going, we have hope. But I feel like something is happening in that way where it's really not that different. And it's a matter of us kind of getting over ourselves collectively so that we can start to rebuild in that way. So and I'm not trying to rose-colored glasses it, I get it.
Totally.
There's a lot of very passionate things out there, but at the same time, we have an opportunity collectively to start from somewhere. And what a great place to start, right? Our common denominators.
Our common denominator. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, one of the other things we talked about, and this leads to our next question for this podcast, is what tools are out there to help bring people together at work. And the one tool we talked about on Tuesday, Calm. I think my brain thinks in acronyms. So 4-step method, just brief. We don't have time to get into like the whole thing, but the C stands for coaching, right? Instead of directing or advising, it's leading with curiosity. Tell me more. Tell me where you're coming from. Tell me what's going on. So coaching, align. So I think about aligning with a mission, vision, and values in the organization, but then also finding out the employees' why. And then there's the opportunity for commonality there. So I think so often we come up with mission, vision, and values, and we throw it up on a wall and we don't come back to it. And those values can be so unifying because there's a reason that people are drawn to work for a community / organization, right? I mean, there is a reason. So find out why. Find out what the employee's why is, so to speak. The L in the 4 steps, you're going to love this one. Lead with Title VII. I mean, it makes no sense, but I just kept thinking about Title VII, and I kept thinking, what if political affiliation was protected under Title VII? How would I show up differently?
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So that's me personally be like, okay, Kathy, you stand tall with people who have physical, mental, emotional disabilities. You stand tall for everyone, and you always have. Why aren't you standing tall for somebody who has a different political affiliation? So that was just like a little check for me that I, shared. And then the M, you're going to love this. The M stands for me, taking care of ourselves, getting back to the wellness piece. So save the best for last. So I'm just curious if you have utilize any specific tools or methods to truly bring, establish a sense of community, to bring people together, especially since you and I have been in HR for so long. We've been through so many elections.
Damn, girl, don't be aging me like that.
Right. I think with age comes wisdom, so I'm okay with it.
True that. My answer is going to be so damn basic, and that's okay. But my answer really comes down to listening, truly listening. And I think that in this area in particular, right, it's really, really hard. And I think that, we've been grown and raised and bred in a society that has really gotten to the point where there's not a whole lot of listening, right? And I think social media has really just created a monster out of that, where it's just all about, we're throwing out, my view, my point of view, and, trying to then, reshare and replug the things that are my opinion and my, perspective. And yet what's not happening enough, and we've kind of already hit on this, is really just being able to truly listen and hear and understand and comprehend from a place of, that curiosity. I don't have to share the opinions and perspectives of another to really be very patient to listen and to hear and to try to understand. And that's not something that I think that most of us, myself included, are, one, comfortable with, and two, practiced at. And so I think that, these moments in our lives are really opportunities to be able to see that a little bit more clearly. And boy, have I been able to see that very, very clearly this last week, how little listening is happening. So I think from the toolbox perspective is about modeling. It's about just showing up and being what I want to see in the world and doing my best to try to emulate what I know in my gut is going to help heal and help people to be able to, feel heard and all of that. And so, again, it's super basic, but I just kind of come back to that in my head where I'm like, that's what's missing. I know it without a shadow of a doubt, is really that capacity to truly be able to be with and listen to those perspectives and opinions and viewpoints of others that don't align with our own. And how can we do it in a way that feels, civil and respectful and all of that. And it begins with each and every one of us kind of gut checking with ourselves about how it is that we're showing up. And am I sitting here formulating my response as I'm listening, or am I really just being with it and allowing myself to be open to something that's new and different and uncomfortable and awkward and, all the things. And that's going to be a work in progress for me. There's no doubt about it. I absolutely see that in myself now, especially given, again, here we are 8 years later. And yeah, it wasn't as much of a surprise this time, but it doesn't mean it wasn't any less whoa,
right.
Whoa. And that, I think, for me is absolutely a call to action. Yeah. And I see it now, whereas I would have never seen it before. So that's what I came up with.
Okay, what about you've got me going, because you started off by saying this is really basic, but it's about truly listening. Mm-hmm. And what started coming up for me, even though I was truly listening to you, but what started popping up for me was how the newscasters, I don't even know if that's the right word, people on the news, they present their opinion. They present the quote unquote facts. They present their argument. And there is judgment in the way that they present. There's a lack of humility. There's a lack of any listening. And then my mind shifted to social media. Social media is the same way. People don't get on social media to listen to other people.
No.
At all. I'm going to tell you how it is. I'm going to cancel people who don't agree with me. I mean, I have seen some vitriol from people I would never expect in the last couple of days. And I actually think what you just shared is huge. And especially in HR, especially if we're trying to bring people together in a post-election workplace. Mm-hmm. We must practice that skill of listening. And one of the things I actually posted on LinkedIn last night was about curiosity and how it's a skill and not an inherent trait. And if people say, well, I'm not a curious person. Like, I am very passionate about this and I'm going to argue my point and I'm going to stand tall for it. Curiosity is a skill. There's no reason we can't practice it. Mm-hmm. Because I think one thing a lot of us don't do is become self-curious. Like, why am I so passionate about this? Why is this so important to me? And going back to EQ, emotional intelligence, like, how am I coming across to other people, especially when we're in the workplace? So I think what you just shared is everything. In fact, I was doing one-on-one coaching with a client, like 1:00 today. So like 6 hours ago. And she was sharing, she's like, I know I need to work on listening.
Mm.
So kind of
we got a theme going here.
There's definitely a theme going here. And I think, where my brain also just went was, let's say Kamala had won. And I'm obviously being very open about who I voted for. If Kamala had won, would I be wanting to be so curious about half the country who did vote for Donald Trump?
Yeah.
I don't know that. I think I would be, if I'm being really honest with myself, I wouldn't be gloating, but I would be in a celebratory mood. Yeah. I don't think I would want to be super curious, or as curious, I should say, because I really have developed that skill. And like, I think I would be more surrounding myself homogeneously with my girlfriends who I run with every single Wednesday. And we've had the same conversations for the last couple of months about the upcoming election. I'd want to be celebrating with them and talking about the future under our first female president, who happens to be Black. Like, yay, double win for Title VII, And if I'm being really honest, it's true. And I would be very curious about the fact that here we are again, half of Americans see it very, very differently. I'm just being honest. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I agree with you completely. That's so funny because that's the exact conversation that I just had today.
Really?
Where we were challenging ourselves in that same question, is if it would have gone the other way,
yeah.
What would be different about the conversation we would be having, right? And I think there's something about that willingness to have the humility around, ooh, you know what? Like, I don't know that I would have necessarily been as open to be able to explore this. And there is something that I think is really, it's going to sound wild, but it's something that's kind of exciting about that.
Yes.
That says,
yes,
oh my gosh, this kind of breaks open something that I didn't realize that really is right there in front of me. So yeah, like it's so interesting because who knows what's going to happen over these next 4 years. Mm-hmm. But there's been a little bit of a shift that's happened within myself.
Yes.
Just being able to say, oh, you know what? Like, I have more to learn here, clearly.
Yes.
and actually being able to like lean into that way more than I would have had things gone the other way. So what you just said is exactly the same conversation that I had earlier today. So
That's so interesting.
wild. Yeah,
That's
it's
so
wild that
interesting.
we're kind of on the same page. And I would be really curious to hear the perspective of others as well. It's like,
Absolutely.
how has that shifted for any of us where maybe we did not expect it? We didn't see this coming.
Yeah.
But here we are. And are we closing ourselves off and saying, get away? I don't want anything to do with, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. Just, and I'm seeing that too. There are some people out there who are just like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. Or on the other side of it, are we seeing those out there who are saying, I think I might want to like lean into this and learn a little bit. So yeah, it's just a really fascinating way of being able to recognize you've got two choices here, right? And it's a path that is one that we can choose to take at any time that might be a little bit different than the path we may have taken in the past. And what a cool thing that could be.
Totally.
Maybe.
Totally. And what I think, it's so funny you brought up the term path, because with that same client I was working with earlier today, we were talking about how we think of path. Like when I visualize a path, I visualize a very straight path. And we always talk about take the road less traveled and a fork in the road and all these analogies about paths. And what my client and I were discussing was what if paths are more like this? Because if I'm being really honest, that's kind of been my path for the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I didn't want to talk to people when I woke up. I was so sad that I went off into the woods by myself. I did not, and that's okay. That was me like truly sitting with my emotions, probably for the first time in such a situation, and being really honest with myself and being okay with it. And then it's only been today where I've really started to explore this thought of you've still got work to do on your inherent bias and your unconscious bias. This is really cool to be seeing. And I'm not shaming and I'm not blaming myself. I'm actually really psyched to have seen it and being really honest with myself, because how can I be a great HR person and expect other people to be open to addressing their conscious and unconscious biases if I'm not willing to do it? I'm not perfect. No human is. So it kind of goes back to like leading by example. And gosh, that just required humility right now for me, at least for me.
I find this wild that, you and I did not plan this at all, but here we are kind of on this very similar place. And I very much, and, we've, it's like kind of going back to, the journey that we've both been on the last couple of years, but there is no doubt about it in my mind that had, both of us not been doing this self-work on ourselves to really get to this point where we can, here a day later, already be to a point where we're, able to kind of push past a lot of our own bullshit and really be okay with this interesting place that we're at. So yay us.
Yeah. I mean, to call ourselves out on the bullshit without the shame, the blame. It's just like, holy smokes, I didn't expect to see you, but there you are, little Miss Bias. Fascinating. What are we going to do with you? Are we going to let you like take over, or are we just going to explore it a little bit? We're going to have a conversation we've never had before.
Yeah.
I like that I act like bias is a spice over here. I don't know.
A little dab of this, a little dab of that.
A little salty. She is a little celery salty. She's very salty and she wants attention, and I'm not giving her attention. She's going to put it in the salt rack. Well, we're 53 minutes in. I think we've covered a lot today. I'm just curious if you have any advice for our listeners out there in terms of cultivating community in a post-election workplace. What would be one I don't know if it's a golden nugget, if it's a tiny nugget. What kind of nugget would you like to offer our listeners to help them cultivate community?
Oh man, I think without it coming across as preachy and without it coming across as like I have all the answers and or anything like that, I really just want to say that whatever you're feeling out there, it's completely okay. Whatever any of us are feeling as we're going through some really significant shifts that we're going to be seeing, it's absolutely okay. But you had said something earlier that I think you nailed so well, and it's really about like starting to be more curious within ourselves, recognizing that if I am feeling especially triggered or emotional, allow that to be, but then don't miss the opportunity to be curious about it when it's right for you. I certainly would never want anybody to kind of force themselves, like strong arming myself to like, push myself into conversations or in a place where I don't feel comfortable and it's too much. But yet, where are those opportunities once we can get to a more of a calm or a place of like emotional kind of I'm a little bit more regulated now, and really starting to be curious in a way that perhaps it hasn't been natural or comfortable in the past. And then two, it's where can we find that sense of community, especially when we're in HR, if we're in HR department of one, or we're, having these small HR departments and it's just, it's nutty out there right now. How can we, really help to cultivate that within our own community and, having that support within, others who are going through the same thing and be able to really kind of have that sense of it's okay. It's absolutely okay that it might feel discombobulated right now. And being able to normalize that a little bit, because when things don't feel normal, sometimes we start to like question ourselves. And I know that that's a normal thing to do. And I would say, try to really become conscious of that so you can find a way to like insert some kind of, what was the word I was looking for? But just insert something to be able to say, well, what is that? What's really happening here, and be able to kind of just start thinking of perhaps different ways that we can learn how to experience these, ups and downs in one, not being alone doing it. So finding, the outlets, and then two, being willing to have that sense of humility from the perspective of maybe I do have more to learn here. Maybe there is something here that offers me an opportunity to have a little bit more in my own toolbox. So, I think that this time that we're going through is one that's going to be a little bit different for everybody. But I think, finding ways to be able to reach out, to be able to kind of feel as though we're not alone in all of this is really, I think, from my perspective, one of the biggest and most important things, because I got to tell you, this hour conversation, I feel so good. I feel so much better in what I know that I'm not alone in. And, it doesn't have to be your own podcast. It can really just be about finding those others out there and trying to start to seek out perhaps others who may not have all of the same answers that you do. And being able to be open to that. But it's a process. For you and I, we've talked about, many times the process of that we've been on and the journeys that we've been on of trying to kind of figure out the shit shows that are going on in our own brains. be okay with that. Be okay that there might be a little bit of like, what the fuck just happened here going on. But then once you have that settling, that's naturally going to happen, because again, this too shall pass. When you get to that point, now what? Don't just close ourselves off and move on and not recognize the opportunity here. So I kind of blurted out a lot of all over the place, but I think
salivating at everything you just said.
I think it's such a personal and unique experience that every individual has, especially when it's, when it's bumpy and when it's, uncomfortable. And so, that in of itself, we have to like just have a little bit of grace and compassion with ourselves. And then asking, now what? What can I do to actually help be a part of this, versus shutting myself down, just throwing out, whatever opinions I have without really recognizing the potential of something bigger that I think is happening here. So, well, what about you? What comes up for you when you think about what you could offer our community and what they can do?
Well, it's just so funny that I came into this podcast thinking so much about external circumstances and how we respond to them. And where I'm ending up now, thanks to you, is a focus more on my inner game and remembering that's where the power move is. And anytime we are triggered or feeling strongly in a way that's doing a disservice to ourselves, like if you're elated, I say go with it. Be elated, be energized, like enjoy every minute of it. But if you're experiencing a not so positive emotion, I do think it's important to sit with it. But when does it become our responsibility to say, okay, that's enough. That's enough. Like I need to get myself out of this. And in my mind, I always go back to Dr. Jill Taylor's research out of Harvard. She's a neuroscientist, and she says our brain is only wired to feel emotions for 90 seconds. But then it's the thoughts we choose that either compound those emotions or we let them go. And that is the power card I want every person listening to this podcast to understand. If you are up shit creek, if you are unhappy, your number one job is to choose a thought that will get you back to homeostasis, get you back to a state of calm, get you back to a place of good so that you can serve your community. Truly, that is your number one job. Take care of yourself. And Jen, I have to highlight what you just shared, that it is going to be individual for everyone. I could sit here and advise or direct and say, hey, I went out in the middle of the woods yesterday, and that's how I got over my pity party, my self-induced shitstorm. Or I could say, what do you know works for you? How have you gotten calm in the past? What thoughts are going to be helpful for you? Because they are going to be different. And I think that's oh gosh, here I go. The power of coaching, which is what we talk about a lot on our podcast, because it's so true. It's so
but
true.
There's really like this beauty in self-coaching.
Oh God, I can't live without my self-coaching. I cannot live without it. I can't.
Yeah. And I think that, that's, there are tools and there are things that take time to build, but being able to recognize what is it that's within my control in all of this, the one and only thing is ourselves, right? And how we perceive and how we react and how we respond. And, being able to like really recognize, and especially in moments like this, that superpower, even if right now I'm so dysregulated, I just need to go out into the woods and scream, right?
I thought about it. I didn't, but I did think about screaming. I did. I'm not going to lie.
But that's a part of it. And that's absolutely okay. But it's really about then how do I come back around and recognize there was something very intense that led me to this place where I then needed this major release. And that's where the self-coaching and any type of coaching can make a huge difference. Because again, like you said, once you get beyond those 90 seconds, now what? It's our thoughts, it's our thinking, it's our, it's our reactions. And so that is really about, okay, well, wait a minute, what do I want? What do I want out of this? And how can I start to shift something that perhaps is not comfortable? It's not normal for me, but yet here I am. And I find myself in this over and over again. How can I really start to kind of put a pin in this and be able to shift myself in a direction that maybe can better serve me?
Bam. Talk about the power move. Like, how can I shift myself in a new direction to better serve me? I think we need to end it there, girl. That was just gold and glitter and unicorns and puppy dogs all over the place, but not in a toxic, positively way. It was just good.
Oh, what a great conversation. I think, I did not expect that this was going to be as good as it was. And it truly was one of the top conversations we've had, because it's not easy. This is not like easy stuff. And yet, you and I have this willingness of being able to go into it from this vulnerability perspective that I'm like, wow, that's where it's at. So, we keep, showing up and putting that out there. That really matters. I think, what this is, I think really does matter. So
agreed.
And as always, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we do this for you, our listeners. We believe in the power of emotional health, physical health, spiritual health, social health, financial health, all of the health. So please, please, please remember that even in a post-election workplace, every single day is a great day to thrive and shine in HR. We can't wait to see you for episode 38. And thanks for joining us today.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.